And the thing is that there was just nobody to help me. And then one person believed in me. This wonderful acting teacher called Kay Jackman. And that's when I realised that I was unemployable. I started this being a reluctant entrepreneur. I found out that actually I had what it took to be an entrepreneur. And maybe you got to be a little mad. It's about fulfilling your destiny of being an autist.
Right.
What am I saying about that? I guess I'm saying sorry. Yeah? I guess I'm saying sorry for my wife, my children. Yeah? Nobody knew at the start of that, growing, getting married, growing a family, that I was an autist with ADHD hyperfocus.
Hey!
Roger.
All right, Phil. How's it going?
Good to see you, yeah. This is going to be a big one, I think.
This is going to be a big one, look, man. As I said, I'm a ray of fucking sunshine, man. Yeah, I've even got it on my socks. Look.
I think I've even got it on my socks.
A ray of sunshine.
No. There's more graphic than that. Oh! Right, okay.
Fantastic.
Right, let's do this, yeah?
Welcome to the Business Alchemist podcast, and I'd like to welcome Roger Horlock.
Thank you, nice to be here.
Great to have you. Roger, we met a little while back because I was a customer of yours. And you do something that's pretty interesting, and I thought it would be fascinating to interview you. And then we had a pre-interview, and I found even more about you, which I thought was probably even more interesting. Yeah. So let me start at the beginning.
Okay.
I met you because you run an independent broadband network in Brighton. And just that in itself is kind of like, wow, that's a bit different.
It gets more different.
It gets more different.
Yeah.
And then we had a big conversation on my roof because I needed an alternative form of broadband. And you explained a lot of that stuff. But then when we had a pre-chat about this podcast, I got to know much more about you. And so I think this conversation will be about business, about selling, but it's also going to be something that's probably even more important to you from what you said.
It's personal.
It's personal.
Everything is personal.
Great.
To me.
And that thing was autism in business.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how about this is going to be a bit of a free-ranging conversation. It could go in so many different directions.
So can I take you from like the first part of that?
Yeah.
Which is in terms of what I do and why it's different, and just embellishing on what you said there. So I run the Brighton Metronet, metrarnet.co.uk is the website, which is a wireless ISP. 25 years ago, I built the free Wi-Fi in Brighton. Nobody knew what the hell I was talking about. And it turns out that was a bit of a thing. Yeah. And I viewed that really as a marketing technique. So I had no money. So I viewed it as a technique to speak to the council and the universities, because the value proposition of the technology at the time was about connecting one building with another in the city. That's when it really shone as a unique selling point.
But this is 25 years ago.
It's 25 years ago, yeah. But the outside internet, that was expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could get it. Of course I could get it. But it was expensive.
Yeah.
And the value proposition of the tech at the time was asymmetric, so same up and down as upload and download. So, for example, I found from the director of IT at the council that the primary schools, there was a massive problem with primary schools in Brighton. He liked us, because it resonated with the Labour-run council at the time, and you were never more than 5 minutes away from internet connectivity in Brighton, and that was due to our work. They hadn't asked us to do it. Yeah, there was a certain social element to it, a social enterprise to it as well. That resonated with the council, and then that enabled us to be talking to him, and then I asked him if there was any pain that I could solve. And I think that's an important element in business. You know, if you can solve a problem, there's a business.
Absolutely.
There. Yeah, there's a business in there.
Absolutely.
So it turned out, you know, the primary schools were a real problem. There was a headmaster who was organising organising his school on a 56k dial-up connection. I mean, wow, what a poor bloke. I mean, what a nightmare.
So this is around 1999.
Yeah, 2000. No. This is 2003, okay. 2002, 2003.
Right.
Because that's when we became a limited company, and then that was we were a free Wi-Fi brand called Loose Connection. Right. Before that, but I didn't feel that we could sell thousands of pounds worth of connectivity whilst maintaining a brand name that is essentially a technical fault. Yeah. But it was a youth brand. It was like a Loose Connection. It was a youth brand. It really worked for what it was, for free Wi-Fi. It worked really well. But for the value proposition of the wider, larger scale stuff, that's why it was called Metranet. That's what it was, a metropolitan intranet.
Got you.
Was where we really saw the value proposition, connecting one building, in the council's case, Hove Town Hall, with a primary school, a bunch of primary schools.
Right.
Yeah?
For all those people who maybe are not as dyed in the wool as we are, an intranet is a connectivity within normally one business.
Yeah, within a building, normally an intranet is within a building, or it was at the time.
Yeah.
It was at the time of the branding of it.
Yeah.
And of course, we could go down a rabbit hole of a wide area, intranet, SD-WANs and the like. But that's for another conversation.
Yeah.
So I talked to the council. I talked to the university. I met the head of IT in the university. I found the top tech who actually ran the data center in the university, and he wanted to send. Oh no, can I say this? No, I don't know if I can say this. Well, he wanted to send dead mice in the post to his current provider at the time. I'm not going to say who the provider was. Yeah?
Right.
So I was like, there's a sale.
Yeah.
Here. There's definitely a sale here.
Because it's a problem. And
it's a problem. And not only is it a problem, he's really angry. He's really angry about this. Yeah. And he had a T-shirt, and it said, I have a sawn-off shotgun, a short temper, and a raised floor in my server room. The implication being where you would end up if you cocked up, Rog. and I think he got that T-shirt especially for the meeting because this was a new technology, and he was like, well, I've got a nightmare scenario with my current supplier, and now you're coming in with this wireless solution.
Yeah.
But the reason why the wireless solution was better and does continually be better in many, not all, but many opportunities, is that it doesn't suffer the degradation of the copper in the ground or any of the collapsed ducts that can happen. You bear in mind that Brighton along the seafront is actually full of smugglers' tunnels. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So do you remember, like, quite a few years ago in the Kingsway, this massive hole, just basically somebody opened a cupboard in the Fortune of War, very old pub. Yeah. And the whole of the road fell through it. Yeah. You weren't around in Brighton when that happened?
How long ago was that?
Well, when was this about? Maybe about 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago.
Oh yeah, I was here then.
Yeah. Well, there was a massive sinkhole in the Kingsway,
and that was a smuggler's.
Well, that was it's basically because of old smugglers' tunnels underneath the Kingsway. So if those roads collapse, you've got to bear in mind that was a big one.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take much for a duct to collapse to shear the cable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got you.
And it's quite a significant. It's not something you can fix by a first-line engineer going, it's a power supply, or it's a thing. No, it's a massive hole in the road.
Yeah.
So there is that. And there's also the other USP of Metronet is that because we don't have to dig up the roads, because we don't have to apply for way leaves to the council for maybe finding that it's a bus lane and then that way leave gets refused, so we can't put fibre through that area to that building. Yeah. We don't have that problem. We just put a radio on the roof and cable down and into the business. So our USP is essentially speed of deployment now. Okay. But at the time, it was the former that was the problem.
Okay,
yeah. So I still manage all the off-campus student residences for the University of Sussex. I've done that for the last 20 years, and they are highly demanding students.
I can imagine, because they want their internet to be.
You could have no water in the building, and that would be a lesser priority than not having functioning Wi-Fi.
Right, I've got you. Okay, so we can go off in lots of different directions from this point. And I'm just wondering, I think maybe let's try and do a little bit of history with regard to, because we opened up, you were really keen to talk about autism in business. So maybe if you could give us a quick précis on how did you get into this tech? Because you explained that's not really you're really a history major.
Yeah.
So how did you get into that? And what part did the autism play, if any, in that?
Autism is a huge factor. Looking back, with hindsight, did not know it at the time. Yeah. Now I've only been diagnosed with autism in the last few years.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I was very late diagnosed with autism and ADHD. Hyperfocus. I'm the flip of ADHD. I spend the majority of my time in hyperfocus, which means that I can get an awful lot done, but it's also utterly exhausting.
Wow.
So those people who are in business or people who are autistic or ADHD, that this was my primary reason for turning up here today, to give them some sort of hope or light or vision or assistance, because there was nobody to help me, and it was hard, Phil. It was really hard.
Now my guess is it must have been harder because you didn't know it. You didn't know that you didn't have a diagnosis back then.
I actually think that's probably made it easier.
Oh
yeah,
because but you didn't label it, or
because at the time I just went for it.
Right.
I just want to tie that in to the beginning of the Metronet, because that's essentially, that would make sense. Yeah. So we did have the free Wi-Fi hotspots. They were on 512k broadband copper connections at the time, so half a meg, and that was good. That was good at that time. Yeah.
Is that? No, okay. Yeah. That's lots of questions about that, but let's carry on. Yeah.
That was good at that time. Yeah. And I was also involved in organising a conference on convergence, what was called convergence at the time.
Yeah.
Where everyone was very much realising that the internet wasn't going to be just on your computer screen.
Yeah.
It was going to be on your mobile devices and the like. So I was involved in some very early tech this is pre-iPhone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which really, that was the game changer.
Yeah.
But this was pre-iPhone, and there were companies who were trying to do that video streaming to mobile phones. So I was involved in that, and being involved in that and having the interest in that and having the free Wi-Fi in Brighton, I was part on a committee for organising a convergence conference in London. And in that conference, there was a Canadian company called Wylan who came to present, and they had the tech that I was really wanting. At least I thought I wanted that. There were some problems with it, but it had a much longer range. It was using a protocol called pre-WiMAX, and that was really challenging 3G as a protocol, LTE as a protocol. And it had the backing of Intel, and I found myself in a limousine going to an aerodrome space with a whole bunch of
Tech heads.
tech journalists, and that was organised by Intel, and I went up and got up and spoke at that. It was a bizarre experience. And so we had this tech. I realised at the conference, and I got that, and I took it to the council, and I took it to the universities, and who came in for their own reasons, and I thought, should I let them know that both of them are talking to me? Because it's either going to give it the additional momentum, or it's just going to go into lockdown. Yeah. And I told them both. I decided to do that. It went into a lockdown scenario, and I was like, it's not a problem. And the council said, well, we'll go if they go. And I say, they're going. And the university asked me, is the council? Well, the council's going. And so I just told them both that they were going, and then they went and we did the project. And so I took that to the Residents Association of Sussex Heights, which is the tallest building in the city. Yeah. And I took it to the AGM that night, and we got unanimous backing of the board. And then with no money, we constructed, because we got some money up front. I think it was from either the council or the university. One of them wanted to pay up front and a lower ongoing fee, and that was fine. Yeah. Because I needed the capital, and then I took that, and we bought the infrastructure. We built the system on top of Sussex Heights, and that was our first base station site in Brighton, 105 metres in free air above the city. And and we got planning permission and all of those things, and I put that all together, and that all took about 1.5 years from start to finish.
So just to timestamp that, then that was around when?
2003.
2003. Okay.
Yeah.
So shall we spin back a little bit before, just to get a little bit of because what we said we were going to do was talk about So how did you get into tech, and how do you think that was relevant to when you're looking back to your autism?
Yeah. So thank you. So I described myself for a long period of time as a reluctant entrepreneur. Because very simply, nobody would give me a job. And so I realised that I have to give myself a job. And nobody would give me a job because I was an undiagnosed autist and I didn't realise it myself. I would go in for interviews and tell people, well, I'm this. I have this huge amount of energy. Yeah. I get ideas of radical ideas of transformation. Yeah. Of how we can grow a business. Yeah. Of doing all of these things, and I can do sales. I can do account management. Yeah. I can do technical project management. I can do production. And then the interviewer. Person who owned the company would just go, well, that's me. I'm looking for a sales guy, mate. Yeah.
So what you're saying is your experience in all of these interviews was kind of pretty similar.
Yeah.
Right. So
when I came down to Brighton.
Right.
When I came down to Brighton.
Okay. So you basically overpowered. You went in.
Maybe I can know that I could, like an autistic thing is to overpower a room. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a way of being comfortable. Strangely, yeah. So that's why some people call me Party Rog. When I'm in a party, I become life and soul of the party. Yeah. I don't mean to take over, but it's entertaining. Yeah, I like Party Rog. But the thing, one of the things about autism is like you can be really loud. Yeah. And you don't know, you haven't got that volume control. Yeah. Yeah. You don't know, you have no filter. Yeah. I have no filter. You don't know when to stop. But I also have found that my words have power.
Yeah.
Yeah, my words have power and meaning as a result. So I've lost as many friends as I've made, and the friends that I've made, I've changed their lives.
Right.
In many ways. We're going off subject.
Yeah,
here.
yeah. No, that's fine. So here's
essentially,
what I'm seeing and hearing. You're coming into these interviews. You're looking to try and get a job, and because of your energy and hyper focus, you're probably intimidating the interviewer to a certain extent.
Maybe.
And did you find then, therefore, that you were struggling to get jobs? Was that why you were struggling to get jobs?
I didn't feel that it was an overpowering thing.
Right.
I felt that they couldn't pigeonhole me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that is I think that is an autistic thing. If I talk to an autist, then I think autists in business, you'll find they have a lot of fingers in pies.
See, I would have thought the opposite, because I would have thought hyper-focus would have meant, so for example, I would have thought tech, right, I'm really into tech, or I'm really into science, or whatever. So you're saying your kind of autistic superpower is a broad one. I'm asking.
I think autism is a case-by-case basis, and ADHD is a case-by-case basis thing. Hyperfocus is a key part of it. I came across a story of someone who was ADHD, it may have been dyslexic, not sure. There was certainly ADHD. They left school at 16, they went into catering, and then they became hyper-focused on bread. And he then built bakeries and bakeries and bakeries, and then designed the Tiger Loaf, and has become one of the biggest suppliers to all of the supermarkets.
As a result of that,
and
hyper-focus.
I don't know if I can say all this, because I don't even know him. I know somebody who knows him who's told me that story, and I said, well, that's ADHD. Right. And she went, oh, yeah, he does have ADHD.
Wow.
But
you
probably
didn't know that then, or did you?
What?
You didn't have those experiences in your head, or did you?
What do you mean?
So at the point when you're doing the interviews and you're trying to get a job,
back to the interviews.
So back to that, because
I didn't know. I was undiagnosed.
Right. Okay.
This is 30 years ago. Yeah. I was undiagnosed. I just knew that I had this ability, that I had this focus of being able to have an idea, take an idea, break it down, deliver it, innovate it, change it, disrupt a market. That I had all of that, but that wasn't a job.
No, but so when you say you had all of that, how did you know that you had that in comparison to other people?
I didn't really, apart from a lot of people saying to my friends going, I remember one of my best mates saying, somebody asked me to describe you the other day, and I just went, well, he's unique. Yeah. So I only take it from those types of things. Right. I wouldn't, I don't think it's healthy comparing yourself to other people.
So you're saying, based on the feedback you were getting from your friends and relations, people you bumped into, you were recognizing a bit of a pattern, that there was something probably a bit different to you compared to other people.
Yeah, sort of. Sort of. I didn't have the confidence at that point, because I was young. I was in my 20s, and you get out of school and university, and you realise that the world owes you nothing.
Absolutely.
The world owes you nothing, and it's hard. And that's the thing, that there may be people watching this podcast who are maybe 16 or 17, 18. They may think they know it all. I'm not sure I was one of those. But
But you probably
but I'm told that's a really common thing in teenagers. Yeah,
absolutely.
And you get out into the wider world, and you get taken down a peg or two, and it's painful and it hurts. And the thing is that there was just nobody to help me.
Yeah.
And it was a struggle, and it was hard.
Yeah.
But I knew that there was something I was capable of doing.
Yeah.
And I think that comes from my father, who's recently died and at 95 years old, and was Guy Horlock was an amazing man. Yeah. And he worked to the very top of maltings, and maltings puts the malt in beer. Right. Yeah. So he started by carrying malt on his back from the canal, and he ended up as chairman of the company, of a company called French and Jups. It's a great company, and his idea was that he saw and I've got to tell you this story because I think he was the biggest ADHD head in the room, completely undiagnosed his whole life.
Right. His
whole life. But that's where I've got it from.
Right, got it.
Yeah. But it's not just that. It's the impact of what your father shows to you what is possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he came into that environment. He worked hard. He then talked to the chairman at the time and said, I think we can innovate the maltings process, because they previously had laid it out on long open warehouse rooms they're all done by tiny chaps, so they all had low roofs. Yeah. And they used to lay all the malt out, and they had these special machines where they turned the malt so otherwise it wouldn't go mouldy. Yeah. And he saw an innovation in the coffee industry for roasting coffee and germinating coffee beans and roasting them. Do the same thing with malt. So you take a barley grain, you give it the right conditions for that barley grain to decide that it's going to become a plant and it's going to do it. Yeah, and at that point where it shoots, it makes it shoot, it decides it's going to be a stalk of barley. Yeah, and when its enzymes are at its highest peak, you kiln the bastard.
Right.
Yeah? And you seal all of that goodness. Yeah? But it was in a process that was all laid out. Yeah? In these long open warehouses. He brought this innovation in. He changed the whole business, turned it into these four massive, the height of this, not quite the height of this building, maybe half, 3 stories.
Right.
Yeah? Drums. Yeah. Where you could control the humidity. You could control the temperature. You could control the time that each grain was in there for. Yeah? So you could perfect the product. The product was the same standard every time. Not, it's slightly musty in this part of the room, but it's okay over there. Yeah? And so he did that. But the chairman said to him, what am I going to do with all of this open space that's left over? And he went, well, I'm going to turn it into a load of factory units, a load of business units, and built a 250-unit business park. And that is the Maltings in French and Jups in Stansted Abbots. And that was then copied by every Maltings in the UK. So the reason why I'm telling you the story is because my father showed me what was possible.
So did you know that at the age when you came out of university, were you aware of that story?
Yeah, of course I was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
he said to me once, he said, Rog, you just have to have one good idea and do it well and you'll be all right. That is nonsense, of course. Yeah? But it's nonsense. It's part of it. But there's no SWOT analysis there. Yeah? Times have changed. He was in a much simpler world. Yeah? We're in a much more complicated world now. Vastly more complicated. But nevertheless, at a time, I took that on board as this is what I have to do.
Right. Okay, I see. So that's fascinating about your dad. So your dad, you probably didn't realize at the time, but he had this hyper focus. He had this like innovative like way of thinking and acting, and you could see that. And was that prior to you going to university?
Yes, yeah, that was you know, like many fathers are role models. Yeah, and their sons look up to them, and you see what is possible. I listened to those words, and it was one of those sentences that really struck me. You know, it really changed my life in that respect. Whether it was right or wrong.
That was the one about the one idea is all you need, right?
Yeah. Whether it was right or wrong doesn't really matter so much. The point was, it made this massive impression on me. And so from, like, I remember at 18 saying, I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm 21, and I'm going to do that by getting enough money together to get a deposit for property, to expand a property portfolio. Yeah. And then I was really into acting, so that would then enable me to go to auditions. You know, so I'd have a revenue stream, and I'd also have the flexibility, because I'd be my own boss, to go to auditions. And then I went to university in Birmingham, and at that point, the house prices started to increase, and I missed it. I missed my window for the money that I had. Yeah.
And what did you go to university to study?
History.
Right.
I wanted to do acting. I wanted to do drama because I loved acting. It was the only thing that was in my head at the time. But my parents, particularly my mum, said to me, you can't do drama. You do history. That'll be something to fall back on. Yeah. And now we're in a stage where the universities are culling their history degrees because they're not vocational. And that was the worst bit of advice that somebody had given me. And I would say, if you was autistic or whatever, or whoever, if you want to go to university, do something vocational or do something you love. Yeah? But I did history because it was easy, that I'd done some of it for my A-level.
Strange you didn't do drama then.
I wanted to do drama, but I took the wrong advice. I took the advice was that I'd have something to fall back on, which was crap.
Yeah.
You know? However, and whilst I was at university, the housing prices went up, and I missed that opportunity. And I was like, well, I've got to rethink this. I've got to completely rethink this. So during that whole time, for my third year dissertation, we had to you had to have your hands on primary source information, historical documents. That was a key thing. And there was one young professor who's American, a chap called Scott, and he said he specialised in CIA movements in Southeast Asia in the 50s. And I was like, yeah, give me the CIA. Let's check out the CIA. This is going to be gritty. Yeah, I could get my teeth into this. I could get hyper focused about this. That's really what it was about. Yeah. And so I started looking at that area, and then in the same time there was the Russians were coming into Afghanistan, so I was looking in that area, and then of course the British Raj was leaving the Indian subcontinent at that point, 1947, and I then sort of my focus moved into Kashmir, and it turned out that the Maharaja of Kashmir was Hindu with an 80% Muslim population, and tried to play the sides against the middle of Pakistan and India, because of course the Indian subcontinent was being split and a line had to be made, and that line ran to Kashmir. Kashmir is sided by 5 countries of Afghanistan, and on the other side of that little thin strip of land, thin, but you know, in comparison, Russia, China, Tibet, Nepal, India, and Pakistan. and it was right in the middle of it. And as it turned out, I happened to be around the corner, but a block away from my parents' house in Hertford. There was this beautiful man called Alistair Lamb, who was the most eminent historian on Kashmir, had worked in intelligence and counterintelligence all his life, had been awarded the Pakistani Star, and he was just an next door neighbour of a family friend, and he lived around the block. And I knew that I needed to have primary source information. I walked in there, and there were top secret documents, intelligence reports that had never been published because he nicked them. But he nicked them from a place that was then burnt down to the ground. So his documents were the only ones existent. I've still got a book of his. It's the only one in the world, and it's a fascinating story. Yeah.
So when you say you walked in, what, you just walked in?
When I was introduced to him and met him, and they said, "Oh, look, Roger, there's a family friend, and he's doing a university degree, and he might be interested in this. Would you meet him?"
Yeah.
And I just walked out and was absolutely fascinated. And so I then specialised in the Kashmir crisis of 1947, the British leaving the Raj, and the birth of the Mujahideen and Jamaat-e-Islami, which is the Sinn Féin of the Mujahideen at the time.
Wow.
And I worked on that for the last year of my university degree. And it turned out that where I was living in Birmingham was Moseley, and Moseley was the centre of the Kashmiri community in the UK.
Just by chance.
Just by chance. And I only found that out because I went for a curry in my favourite Balti house called K2. I hope it's still there. It's a beautiful curry house, has booths alongside. I love a booth. Who doesn't love a booth? It was a lovely place. And I talked to the maitre d' and I said, well, I'm doing this. And he was like, you have to meet our chef. And I was like, okay, right. And I went to meet, he took me around, and I told the chef, and the chef jaw dropped. And he was like, can you get this document? That is this? Yeah, I said, I've got that document. It's a top secret document. It's been published, but I have a copy. Can I have a copy of this? And this chef, they're all part of the KLF, the Kashmir Liberation Front. And I came back and I gave him those documents, and I had free curries for a year. And it just happened to be. So then from there, I learned that there was some people, young kids in the KLF that were being flown out to that area to train in mountain warfare in case the Russians invaded again.
This is for the Mujahideen.
Yeah.
Wow.
But that wasn't actually, and I was like, that wasn't actually what was happening. It wasn't that they were training for the Mujahideen. It was that the recruiting was Osama bin Laden.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
And having gone through there and then thought, okay, well, my way into acting now has got to be via TV. I got a job, and I got a job in a post-production studio in St John's Wood, and to learn some tech. And then out of there, I then negotiated via Alistair Lamb's contacts. I went into the Pakistani embassy in Knightsbridge and met Colonel Zahid Hamid, and then that was when the negotiations with ISI, Pakistani military intelligence, began, and then I got myself flown out to Islamabad following Lord Nazir Ahmed of Rotherham, who was the only Kashmiri in the House of Lords, and as a kind of a piece, as the sort of local boy that did good, who made it to the top of the British establishment. And in doing that, I got flown to Islamabad. I cut a deal with a chap called Salim Malik, who was chief of staff for BA Heathrow, who wanted a piece for PTV, a cable channel at the time. So I did some filming for him in return for business class tickets. Again, this is all with no money, yeah. And then got flown out, and then found, I went out to go and meet Pervez Musharraf, who's the military dictator at the time. It all nearly went well, apart from the fact that I would never known the owner of the PTV cable channel was a wanted man by the Pervez Musharraf regime.
My goodness.
And my camera got taken off me.
Wow. So what was the time scale around that? Because that's a lot of things.
That's the millennium.
Oh, that's the millennium.
Yeah.
So, but was that was during your last year at university?
No, that was just after.
Just after.
After
okay.
university. In terms of trying to, one plan had fallen apart, and trying to get a different plan together, and then ending up and also I think it was particularly my mum said, "Oh, you can't do that." And it was just like a red rag to a bull, which I think is another autistic thing. Yeah. Yeah. Being absolutely, somebody saying, you can't do that, you're not capable of doing that. Yeah. And that being the trigger of going, you just watch me. And I was 23.
And so what happens in your mind then when you hear that? When someone says, you won't do that, is there something that triggers that says, well, why don't I try that? Or what is the process in your mind?
It's immediate and reactive.
Right.
Yeah. Is you just watch me.
So does this happen to you generally? You don't, whenever someone says, I don't reckon you can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that would be a general reaction. If it is my hyperfocus.
Right.
Yeah. If it is my hyperfocus. And that was at the time. And I felt really passionately about that. And 2 years later, a year or 2 years later, that, planes are being flown into the World Trade Center. Because what I wanted to get was a shot of a Brummy kid shouting Allahu Akbar in a Brummy accent. I mean, that was for me was the gold that I was looking for. Yeah. But I saw melted heads. Oof. Yeah. That, and going, but it didn't affect me. I just knew that as a historian and as a producer, my job was to capture this, I'm sure wrongs have been done on both sides. Yeah. That's not what it's about. It's not about going, well, this side here's the truth, or this side's better. Often it's a choice between two wrongs. Yeah. But nevertheless, I was there and I was filming that, and I found that my brain worked incredibly fast, incredibly focused, and that I could become addicted to war journalism very, very quickly. But then my girlfriend at the time put an offer in a house in Brighton, and my freelance career came rapidly to an end, and I had to get a job in Brighton. Right. And that's when I realised that I was unemployable. Right. So, and that I had to give myself a job rather than out of need.
Now, there's one part that, because we chatted before about this interview, about this chat, you mentioned about guerrilla warfare thinking.
Yeah, that's a really good point that you're bringing up. Thank you, because this is I don't want to sound corny about it, because I remember guerrilla marketing being an expression at the time.
Or several books.
Yeah, I haven't read them. Yeah. I don't tend to read things like that. It's important for my identity that it's come out of this brain, not somebody else's. I don't know why.
And when you say come out of the brain, you mean you've experienced it yourself?
No, that the ideas that I'm purveying,
Right.
the ideas that I'm talking about here have come out of my head,
Yeah.
not being read from a book.
Yeah.
Great, there are books out there on it. Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
I often find that I talk about this and somebody goes, "Oh, that's Nietzsche," or you know, and I'm like, "Okay, well, that's my philosophy. That's Rog." Yeah. And it's important to me. And I remember when guerrilla marketing came out as a thing, and I'm like, I'm going to say Che Guevara. I'm the whole everything. Everything that I do is guerrilla.
Right.
Essentially, I took everything I learned out of studying guerrilla movements, tactics, the structure of organizations in my studies, and then I mapped that to a business environment. So I mean, mission. Again, mission became a real thing for startups. Got to have a mission. Yeah. But for me, it was like, no, this is what we're fighting for.
Yeah.
This is my mission.
Yeah.
Yeah. My mission is going to be, I'm going to create a disruptive network in this city. Yeah.
And your mission for this conversation was you wanted to get out your story about autism and in business.
Yeah.
Right.
But in terms of an autist, I guess what it is an autist finding his or her way in life. And I found it's every autist is different. And I found that was where I drew my experience from. You look at things in a different way. I look back in hindsight. You look at it in a different way, and I found that I needed mission. I needed decentralization of power. I needed agility, speed of decision making.
Did this come from the guerrilla training?
This is what I took from studying the Mujahideen.
Wow.
You had to have, you could be successful, but you had to be innovative.
Yeah.
So, for example, with the Mujahideen, there was a Stinger missile that was given to them by the CIA. So the Mujahideen they were friends with America for quite a long time.
Big time,
Yeah.
Well, they were funded by America, were they?
Well, they were funded by America, and they came in the form of, for example, Stinger missiles. So you had the Russian helicopter, where the heat source was right in the center of the blades. Yeah. Now, that's no good for a handheld heat-seeking missile, unless you're in a mountainous environment like Afghanistan, where you can just give a shepherd who's got his food source with him. He can put him up on a mountainside, and these helicopters are going through the valley, and then he's pointing his Stinger missile down on top directly at the heat source. And you take a $5,000 Stinger missile and you compare that with £500,000, probably at the time, but more now, a helicopter, and then you have a war of economics.
Wow.
And it's those kind of things that changed the Russian-Afghanistan war.
So I see.
So to go back to that is innovation. Yeah, guerrilla tactics of the Mujahideen. They had tanks rolling in. So what did they do? They stitched up a load of carpets and linen, bed linen. Yeah, they stitched up a load of bed linen and threw it over the tank, so they couldn't see what they were doing.
Wow. And
then attacked the tank.
So
and it's as simple as that. Yeah. So these are tactics to say, I as me, Rog, 20-year-old, I don't have any money. Yeah. I've got to be agile. I have to be innovative. I want to disrupt. And all of those. I mean, I was like, guerrilla marketing. This is it. Design the whole thing. Design the whole thing as a guerrilla business. Live it. Don't just give it lip service oh, I'm going to fly something or slap something on a wall which I don't pay for that people see. Make the whole, don't just live it, make the whole business is a guerrilla fighter.
And mission driven.
Mission driven. Decentralization of power, so you're empowering people. You're not just giving that to your the people who are working for you, but your customers as well. And those, I mean, because I'm not a happy-go-lucky sales guy. We've all met them. It's a really standard technique, and you're like, oh, here's the smiley bloke who's going to come and charm the pants off me. You know, okay, here we go. And it's really commonplace, and I'm not that person. But what I can do is talk from the heart and mean it and believe it, and they should believe me because there's no reason why they shouldn't.
So that's another track which we might come back to, which is selling.
Because that's where I was going to lead you to is selling. If you want to.
Because what you've just talked about, there's a concept out there now called exponential organizations, and exponential organizations really follow a Silicon Valley sort of strategic blueprint, and a lot of the things that you've just mentioned. Decentralization, clear mission, autonomous, innovation and engagement are big parts of a Silicon Valley kind of business blueprint.
And disruption.
And disruption.
Yep.
Absolute classic. Now, I'm just wondering is there anything else that you want to say about the guerrilla mindset thing? Because when we chatted, one of the words I remember you talking about was resilience.
And it was where I was going. And again, thank you. That was really astute. So I started this being a reluctant entrepreneur. And then there are things that I probably can't talk about in this podcast. That there are things that are thrown at you as a businessman person that you could never expect, you could never plan for, where elements try and take your business away from you. And that happened to me. And I found out two things at that point. I found out that actually I had what it took to be an entrepreneur, and maybe you got to be a little mad. You got to go further than anyone else is prepared to go. And I remember saying to my wife, "I'm going to get through this, darling, even if it kills me." Now that makes no sense, And she asked a question. She told me much later. She asked a question that is logical, which was, well, where does that leave us, as in her and my two kids? And I'm not proud of this whatsoever, but the answer at the time was nowhere. Nowhere. Hear me out. I take no joy in saying this, in admitting it. I do it because I think it's important. And I'm not advocating being this kind of businessman. That you actually sacrifice your own family for this. But what turned out was a hyper-focus. Metronet is a hyper-focus for me. So two things I said. One was that, and the second was, at that point, then that was my journey into therapy, because I became so stressed that bolts of lightning, of electricity were shooting up my body, and I was convulsing uncontrollably. And that started a journey of therapy to deal with the level of stress of entity or entities trying to take hold of your business from a technical perspective. A technical perspective. At one point in the Metronet, I was locked out of every single router in my network, and I couldn't tell my clients. In real money, it cost me over 50 grand. In lost business, it cost me over £250,000. I got through it with 8 grand in the bank.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now I've built from that point Metronet up to £1 million turnover business. Yeah. I didn't know that I had what it took, that I was actually an entrepreneur until that point. That was the point that I realised, oh, you're not a reluctant entrepreneur.
You are one.
You're actually doing the job that you're supposed to do. And my job is to give people jobs. Yeah.
So at what point did you have that realisation then?
When I got through an aggressive business attack more than takeover scenario.
And was that because at the time, we probably don't need to get into detail of it, was that because other people realised that you had something that was worth having? Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they wanted it. They wanted it. And they were part of a very powerful organisation, and you will know who I'm talking about. You will know. Really? If you haven't worked it out now, you'll go home this evening and you'll work it out.
Wow, that's interesting. Okay.
And it was from the same experience that I then went into therapy, and that then to deal with the sheer level of stress. Yeah. And that then led finally something like over a decade later as a diagnosis of autism and ADHD.
Wow. So that was a 10-year period of starting therapy and all the stress to getting to the point where you realize, oh, I understand. This is what's been happening.
This is who I am. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And that it's this story that is my motivation for being here. Yeah. Because I'm sure I haven't seen your other interviews. Yeah. I don't tend to watch other business people in interviews, and likes of Richard Branson showing us, you do it like this, and I'm like, no, it's just a load of luck. You make your own luck. And you could be determined, but don't preach to me about this is how you do it. I get it. But there's huge amounts of luck involved. But equally, for those people who are out there in the education system at the moment, it is not designed to produce entrepreneurs. It's designed to produce employees.
Absolutely.
And that is a problem with British culture. I would even say English culture. No, British culture. I'm meaning indigenous British culture. Because we are a cosmopolitan country, and I love that. But the cultures that come in, Chinese, Indonesian, Vietnamese, Indian, Pakistani, there are lots of cultures where entrepreneurship. Thank you. Entrepreneurship is ingrained in that.
It's part of the culture, isn't it?
It's ingrained in that culture. And we've lost that.
Absolutely.
And that means that those people come over here, it's fine. And then they go, look, there's a load of people we can give jobs to.
Absolutely. So, okay. So that's an interesting point, isn't it? So,
and for those kids who are at school right now, and they feel that they can achieve, but they don't want to be pigeonholed. I just want to tell them and make them understand that that's not your fault. That's the fault of the system that is surrounds you.
Yeah.
And that same drive
Yeah.
in me to disrupt,
Yeah.
to stick it to the man.
Yeah.
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 And I still have it every
Yeah.
day. And it was only when I made Metronet successful
Yeah.
that I became a happier guy,
Yeah.
a happier person,
Yeah.
because it fulfilled. And I thought that it was because I'd matched my dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd done what my dad had done, and the like, and that was told to me as well. And I thought it was that, and it's not. It's about fulfilling your destiny of being an autist,
Right.
an ADHD, autist spectrum kind of person.
Yeah.
And it allowed me to fulfill that area of the person that I am.
Yeah. So there's two big. I'm hearing two big themes there. Theme one is we're really bad at entrepreneurism in this country,
Terrible.
to the point that I've written posts about this. That why don't we teach entrepreneurism in school? Why don't we?
And I have contacted schools to say I'd really like to speak about that.
Yeah.
If you need somebody to come and
Yeah.
actually talk about
Yeah.
entrepreneurism and autism
Yeah.
and ADHD and spectrum, I will happily come tell you about it. Never had a response. Maybe that's mad. Maybe because it's mad. Maybe they go, well, whoa.
Well, what's mad about it? I mean, if you think about it, what drives the economy? What drives growth in the economy? It's entrepreneurs. It's people like saying, well, let's start something new. Let's add to what we've got. So why don't we teach that?
Let's change it. Let's shake it up. Yeah.
So that's one big theme, and the other is obviously the diagnosis. Let's maybe try and break down because I think there's two parts. One of the biggest. Tell me if you agree. One of the big parts, the big challenges of being an entrepreneur is being able to sell your idea, your concept, your disruption, your product, whatever it is. Now, when I listen to you talking about selling, because I was asking you, do you have a sales team? And you say,
no, it's me.
It's you.
Yep.
Which for a 1 million turnover business is quite unusual, especially in tech.
Yep.
So maybe if we go into that for a little bit, because I can talk a lot about selling, but let me just ask you, what's your philosophy around selling?
Is relationships.
Okay.
So, it took me quite a long time to work out, or actually to get other people to understand how they could benefit from the Metronet. People in property, people who are involved in property, so mainly landlords.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that having a gigabit enabled building would benefit them. Yeah. It would be much more easy to market a property that had everything there, all lined up, ready to go. Yeah. And being a person who could deliver that. And so through all of those connections over the years, and very often being the person who saved deals, yeah, because you can have glass walls and wooden floors, but if you got no comms, you're screwed as a business. And also, so either being in the building already, we're in one of them, yeah, or the USP of Metronet being speed of deployment, because as soon as somebody signs on the dotted line of their lease, they are paying that rent. And time is money, and that entrepreneur wants their operational efficiency, their operation up and running as soon as possible. So having a delay of 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, I came across one not so long ago that was over a year, and having one client in a new build in Brighton close to Brighton Station, where there were the most expensive square footage in the city, and they had 4 comms providers who all couldn't deliver it. We kicked out the one that had made the least amount of progress. We were supposed to be the backup. We are now the primary gigabit for an international legal firm.
Wow.
And their cost was £2,000 a day.
Wow. So back to the
So being, as I say, in terms of selling, I'm not the happy-go-lucky sales guy, but I mean it. Yes, it's my hyper focus. Everything is personal to me. This business is personal. No, I don't call it my baby.
Right.
Yeah, I don't call it my baby. Yeah, it's personal.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
Uptime is personal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's my hyper focus. If you want anyone to be in charge of your network, make them an autist. Yeah,
Yes.
who actually gets excited by data.
Yeah.
Sad. Yeah,
No.
I know.
So what
It's okay.
So what you're saying, I think, is that I'm always going back to the story you told about the guerrilla stuff. The mission, the belief, the why
Yeah,
that you've got for your tech
yeah.
is coming out in your selling.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. If it depends on the client, where I'll not tell them all the crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But if they're a younger, more more hip, your word, business,
Tech savvy.
just a younger business who is a similar, maybe in age or younger to me.
Yeah.
Then I'll say, look, this is it. This is what the route is.
Yeah.
And that, as a sales technique, I've learned over the years, is where people use it. I don't know, sales is a malicious thing, and you're using techniques to take people's money.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be classed as, identification. So somebody who's buying from you identifies with you. They're the same kind of person as me.
Yeah.
I understand them. I like them. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there are those types of sales techniques, and I'm aware that they're those.
Yeah.
I wasn't trained in anything. I've never had a day's training in anything in my life. My life, Phil.
Yeah. Doesn't surprise me.
Does it?
No, it doesn't surprise me at all.
Okay,
no.
I didn't even understand that as an That's gone flown right over my head. Yeah, as many things do with
What? Because everything you're saying is you learn, you get stuff, you think from experiencing, rather than reading or someone telling you.
Yeah, and listening and feeling.
Yeah.
And gradually producing a picture.
Yeah.
Of this is how I work, and this is how I can be successful. So to come back to your original question, which was, okay, so you're the only person who's selling Metronet. I in ISPs of what we call altnets, alternative networks. There will be a sales director, a sales manager, and be like a team of 5 salesmen, women. Yeah. And doing that, risking that, and hoping that you haven't employed a numpty, you haven't employed a blagger, that you're risking something over a 3-month period, because it'll take them that amount of time to get up to speed.
Yeah.
You're risking about 180 grand.
Yeah.
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 And then, and that might pull off, or it might not. And I can't afford that risk. And secondly, their success rate will be between 2.5% and 5% of their time. Of picking up a phone. Yeah. And my success rate is over 90.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned that, and that's incredible. That's unheard of.
It is apparently unheard of. Yeah,
Yes, it's completely.
it's unheard of, and equally sometimes I put this. I do occasionally an email out called the Metronet Spotlight. I know this does sound cheesy, where I shine the light on a local business. One of my customers, as a kind of a value add, look, everyone, this guy has joined the Metronet, now here's a token for like 20% off your sushi that is coming out. That was one of them. Yeah, and I talked to somebody in direct mail, and they said, oh, if you've got an opening rate of like 30%, you're doing, you're at the top end. And I looked at MailChimp, and it was 75.
Yeah, back in the day, not now.
No, it's not back in the day. I'm talking now.
MailChimp open rates for email, 75%.
Yes, of my
of yours.
my opening rate.
Oh yeah, I'm talking about.
I send a mail via MailChimp, the Metronet Spotlight, and over 75% of my customers open it.
Right. Well, again.
And then there was like another high level of click-throughs and action and stuff like that. I don't have time to spend on it. Yeah, but that's what I said to the guy, and the guy. His jaw dropped.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
And I'm like, I don't think I'm a, hey, look, I'm a guru. I really don't. Yeah. But I mean it, Phil. Yeah. I mean it.
So I think that's your message, and it's coming out, I think, again and again and again, that if you've got this kind of autistic spectrum, then one of your superpowers is obviously focus and belief in what you're doing.
Yes.
And you've translated that, you've taken that into this tech world, and because of that, you've outstripped and outsold other normal tech companies.
The incumbent power.
Say again?
The incumbent power. Think guerrilla.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's the incumbent power, and there's the guerrilla operator.
So here's a little.
Yeah. So there's disruption. Yeah. There's innovation.
Yeah.
There's passion.
Yeah.
There's mission.
Absolutely.
That is everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it makes me get out of bed every day. Every day. I love it.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. Yeah, sure. Broadband it's a dull discussion. And that's the reason for the Metronet Spotlight. Nobody wants to talk about broadband. And I really would love to have you on that spotlight. And I don't. That would be. I think it'd be a bit crass if it was this interview.
Yeah.
Oh God, it's going to be, isn't it? Oh no.
Well, let's see. Let's see how it goes. But, okay, here's a question to you then.
Yeah.
So how do you? Because I completely hear I hear the risk. From a sales perspective, and clear that is a big issue for a lot of tech companies, especially.
Yeah.
But how do you scale? Now, it depends what you want, obviously, as well, doesn't it? So let's say you wanted to scale 10x.
Yep.
There comes a point where you can't run around 10 times faster. Certainly not 100 times faster.
No,
you can't speak to 100.
No, I get it. We all have the same problem. We all have 24 hours in a day.
Yeah.
And you need to get some sleep.
Yeah.
Some sleep.
So what's your mind telling you as to how you're going to do the next? If you want to do the next.
No, I did want to. I don't now, but I'll tell you what I did.
Go on.
Yeah. I might now, but yeah. So there was a time about maybe 7-8 years ago where I wanted to scale up the business. I was like, okay, let's see if we can go for this. Yeah. And I got via a contact, I got a chairman for the business, and he was, I think I'll leave his name out of it. But he was a lovely guy.
Yeah,
great chap. He was the chairman of a company who listed on AIM. He had access to, I think it was Barclays Bank would give him a rolling fund in 300 grand tranches.
Yeah.
You spent 300 grand?
Yeah.
We'll give you another 300 grand.
Yeah.
We believe you.
Yeah.
We've seen your business plan.
Yeah.
We get it. And he did.
So it was like seed funding, was it?
No.
Just a rolling.
This I then created a business model And I think that's really another really important thing is lots of people write business plans, but don't write the business model. And it's the business model that everyone wants to see. Yeah, they want to see an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And I created that business model of rolling out Metronet in 80 towns across the UK. And we worked out we needed £22.5 million in funding. And nobody was going to give the guy that ran the free Wi-Fi in Brighton, this guerrilla dude with no track record, 22.5 million quid. Yeah. And so I got somebody who I thought would front it, who was known to the city.
Yeah.
And the like. And even then I knew that we had to gain a Spectrum license. That at the time, that was a key thing for investing into a wireless business. You could have any crappy bit of Spectrum, but you had to have something from Ofcom for that to be your IP, that investors could go, oh, we're going to have that. I understand. Yeah. And that was it at the time. And this is a really long story. It goes back. I'll try and give you the 7-inch version. It's not the 12-inch album. Yeah, I'll give you the single version. At the time of the 3G licenses, the operators spent something 22 billion pounds on the licenses, and the guy that did the auction used game theory, and he just took all their money,
right?
Because they didn't trust each other.
This is during the time of Gordon Brown, I think.
Gordon Brown,
yeah.
And Gordon Brown, suddenly these Treasury went, okay, Chancellor, we have this sort of 22 billion pounds for the licenses, for the 3G licenses, and he, obviously he wouldn't have said it like this, but he just went, what? We have 22 billion pounds for some air? Yes, sir. Yeah. And then he asked a really intelligent question, which was, how much more air do we have? And he commissioned something called the Cave Audit. It was led by Professor Cave, and there was a chap who worked on the Cave Audit. And somehow I was talking to him. And for me, this was another guerrilla technique of penetration of the incumbent power. Yeah. Then I worked for a couple of years showing that some of the spectrum that was there, some of the air that Gordon Brown's Cave Audit identified was used by the military for defence of the realm. But it wasn't owned by the military, it was owned by the Crown, it was owned by the Queen. Yeah, the Queen owns the air. Great. Yeah. And there was basically a sort of a fine process. If you didn't release this, if it was shown that you could use it and you didn't release it, then you'd have to pay for it. And if that scenario developed, then you'd have to close a shipyard. Close a shipyard, an MP loses their job. Yeah? And that, I thought, was the motivator. And so I ended up, creating a project with Reading Borough Council, and there was some sort of fund, government fund, to build a Metronet on MOD spectrum in Reading.
Wow.
And I delivered that. It was a £1.8 million project. Metronets was about 475 grand of that, but everything else was pivotal everything else was dependent on us, and I delivered that on time and 10k under budget, which was unheard of in those kind of funding projects. And that was my attempt to wrench some spectrum out of the MOD. But I eventually had the meeting. I met with Kinetic, which is the commercial, I don't know how they would describe it, commercial arm of the MOD. There's a relationship between Kinetic and MOD. And I finally had the second meeting with the head of the spectrum for the MOD, who, having done all of the work and this includes projecting the WiMAX, pre-WiMAX, this protocol that we were using at the time, from a destroyer in Loch Ewe in Oban in Scotland, whilst the RAF flew fighter jets over it. Think of the money that's involved in this, yeah? And in those tests, we found that the MOD had mitigation, electronic warfare mitigation technology that said, yeah, we can see your system, but let's take it out. Which meant they could coexist in a warfare scenario when they needed it, yeah? Mine would stop working probably, but theirs was not a problem.
Wow.
And that proved the coexistence, and that then enabled the spectrum to be released, and that's why you had, well, WiMAX didn't win it, 3G LTE won it, 3G, 4G, 5G, and that's how we got it to today. Yeah, was because it was wrenched out of the MOD.
So what we started.
Your question was about how to expand Metronet, and that was my attempt of expanding Metronet. Was creating. It was a business plan to create 80 Metronets across the UK, and a reasonable amount of thinking in that. You know, how much would it cost to set up each office? You know, and then I would sit back, and then I would have area managers, and then we'd have technical managers doing these, and creating that structure. In answer, very long-winded answer to your question of how do you scale this type of business? Well, that's how you do it. And it's a real shame that we didn't get the funding because we didn't get the spectrum license. We didn't win that battle. It was 2 years of my life, and I think I lost about a few tens of thousands of pounds in doing it. And actually, it didn't matter because new tech came out and the connection voucher scheme, and then its bigger brother, the gigabit voucher scheme, came out. And the connection voucher scheme, and this is why I say there's luck involved, but you make your own luck. And it was where David Cameron, instead of giving money to BT to upgrade the network, which had always been the case, he obviously decided that wasn't working, and that he would give a voucher to any business that wanted to upgrade their broadband, and this was decentralization of power. And I looked at it and I was like, that's going to work. Because you're decentralizing that decision making to the business owner, who could choose from all of the registered suppliers to this scheme. And Brighton happened to be one of the first test cases. So there were 5 test cases. There was one in Manchester and Liverpool and Birmingham and Brighton and London, I think it was.
Wow.
And another chap who worked in that on that same convergence conference in London, he ended up as the program manager for that, and he called me up and he said, "Rog, there's this thing coming." I know he wouldn't mind me saying that. There's nothing illegal about it. It's just he was giving me heads up. So the connection voucher scheme came along. We were lucky. Brighton happened to be one of 5 test cities. And I was lucky because I had a contact who I worked with on that same convergence conference in London. And he said, you know, Rog, I've just set up this. I happen to be, you know, in this, and I know that you're you've got an ISP in Brighton. And I'm like, yeah. And he said, well, we're just setting up this at the moment. I just want to let you know. And so that was nothing illegal about that. They was doing his job, in fact. And that gave me I got the heads up, a load of organisation. Within a week of launching, I had my first voucher. My first company was a great agency called Tilt in Brighton. And we had the marketing, we had it built, we had the press, a photo with me and the entrepreneur there. and with the hardware and Brighton in the background and the like. And then that got onto the council's website as well. So when somebody looked for a voucher, they got this is an example. And there were 478 suppliers, and I led that scheme for the vast majority of time, and I did £500,000 of vouchers, and that was out of, I think, a £1.8 million pot. It was less than 2 million, and I remember right at the end it changed, so that it was BT, Virgin, TalkTalk, and then Metronet were they advertised the top performers for the whole thing. But for the whole thing, it was Metronet at the top, bang, 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 bang. So with those others, it must have been they lowered the price of their voucher and just went, we can't have this altnet winning this. We'll have £200 vouchers or £10 vouchers or whatever. Yeah, we'll give a discount. You know, whenever somebody calls up the call center, oh yeah, well, if you have a voucher, then you can do this, and then that'll mean that you pay less a monthly, and and they'll go, oh, great, yeah, and then that put them at the top. But I did £500,000 worth of vouchers, and that's more than a quarter of the pot, and I ended up fourth. So, and out of 478 suppliers, and that tells me, the maths tells me that I was. Metronet took most of the money, took the largest amount of money. Yeah, doesn't matter about the amount of vouchers, but the amount of money. Yeah, and I thought that was finished, and then the gigabit voucher came in. That same scheme, which was a UK wide scheme, because the first scheme was a test for the larger scheme, and then we did exactly the same amount of money again, and I was audited as well. That was 6 months of my life, fortunately during COVID. But the point is, so I had the time to complete it and pass with flying colours. Yeah. Right. But the point is that it was the fact that we couldn't get the money for the funding for this £22 million worth of funding from the investors, because we didn't have a license. It didn't matter. And if they had gone in, well, Metronet would be a very different story now, but they would have made an utter killing, a total killing, because there was a UK-wide £3,000 voucher scheme that was available to all of the businesses in the whole of the UK, and we would have been perfectly positioned. I probably wouldn't be alive. I probably would have just, worked myself into the ground. And that's a thing you've got to be aware of as an autist in business. Yeah. But, yes, scaling, I get it. But I decided to then just bring it back, focus on Brighton, and actually that's when Brighton really took off.
Got you. Okay.
And there's enough business in this town to take what I want to do to the next level. But you were asking about scalability.
Yeah. Because what you've just said there, kind of to me, from my experience, that scaling challenge is one of infrastructure and funding. And that's always a challenge when it comes to scaling a business. The other part of scaling a business is, how do you scale? How does one scale the founder? How does one scale the skills of the founder, the mission of the founder, the energy of the founder, and the excitement of the founder? Because there is a thing, and we can probably tell in this podcast here, that you love what you do.
Yeah.
And everyone who you probably meet, in fact, funny story, I met, you introduced me to an office, a landlord.
Oh, right, yeah.
And I bumped into him, I went to see him.
Oh, yeah.
And we were talking about you.
Right.
And he says, well, Roger really is an amazing guy, isn't he? And doesn't Roger believe his stuff? I said, yeah. I don't think I've met anyone that believes his stuff any more than Roger. So, but that's a challenge when it comes to scaling, because how does one extract that energy and belief from the founder into the people who work in the organization? So we can go in a number of different ways with that. So do you want to talk about how you've managed, because I would imagine some people out there listening to this and watching this might be thinking, well, there's probably a lot of autistic people who maybe find it difficult to communicate with other people. That's not your challenge.
No, I'm a high-functioning autist.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, and that's a whole other track, I guess. So how have you...
Yeah. Well, Rain Man, low-functioning autist. Einstein, high-functioning autist. Elon Musk, high-functioning autist.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Elon Musk, high-functioning autist.
Yeah.
Much richer than me.
Yeah.
Einstein, high-functioning autist, much cleverer than me.
Yeah.
But,
got you. Okay.
But both of them are, self-admitted,
Yeah.
high-functioning autists. Yeah.
Certainly Elon Musk. I mean, I've read his book and he's incredible. So anyway, so how have you describe yourself there as a high-functioning autist?
I've got your question.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I've got your question about
Right.
how do you impart that through
how
through a
have you-
culture of the company?
Yeah.
How do you pervade
Yeah.
the company
Yeah.
with
Your belief,
with your beliefs
Yeah.
and passions
Yeah.
and the like?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm the right person to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I haven't done it. Yeah, I haven't done it. I haven't scaled this business.
Yeah, but you've got an organization of how many people?
8.
8.
Yeah,
Okay. Still 8 people.
it's still 8 people. But I haven't done the thing that I tried to do,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
I don't take any blame for it. I
Yeah.
thought I'll give it a go.
Yeah.
I'll give it a go. Give it a crack. Yeah, let's throw the dice.
Yeah.
What I do see, so I'm not going to. Basically, I'm going to put myself out there as well. Hey,
Yeah.
I'm a guru. I'm not a guru.
Yeah. Got
Yeah,
you.
I'm not a
Yeah,
guru,
yeah.
but I can give you a perspective and I can give you an opinion. And I hope it's valuable. Yeah, is that if you don't, well, one way of saying it is if you don't impress your culture upon the business, then other cultures will come up, and it doesn't end well. Yeah, it doesn't end well. And there are those types of cultures, so you get your what are they called? Hero cultures. Branson.
Yeah.
It's I think they're trying to make it less about him and more about the brand, but
Yeah.
fundamentally,
Yeah.
he's been put out there as like, I'm a really nice guy.
Yeah.
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 And I mean, hey, I don't know him. Maybe that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he's also very astute.
Yeah.
But he did do like for example, what would be the lesson of how you expand? And this is decentralization of power, essentially delegation. And he had the advantage. And I find a lot of business people are dyslexic. Yeah, the people who run businesses are dyslexic, so they automatically, through their spectrum perspective, they have to delegate. They have to push things away from them. Yeah, and it goes back to that original thinking that we were talking about. We've all got 24 hours in the day. We all have to sleep. We all have to eat. Yeah, etc.
Completely.
Yeah. So the more you can push things away from you, the more chance you have of scaling. Of scaling, and that requires talent. That it requires employing the right kind of people. I think actually, and I mean this sincerely, where somebody like you would come in really well for a business, let's say around the size of Metronet, that had the intention of growing. Because very often the founder isn't the person who it can get it to a certain level. Maybe they can go well beyond, and I totally understand that. A lot of people do. Well, not a lot of people, because not a lot of them around. But the guy that set up IKEA would be a really good example of that. That he carried on being the chairman of IKEA from 16 years old to when he died sort of recently, and he was over 90. Yeah. Carrying on doing that.
Yeah.
But actually, I think most people need a hand, and because they've got it, you can get it to that space, but then bringing somebody else in and laying out a strategy, bearing in mind how much money you've got. Metronet is a self-invested company. I've been reinvesting for over 20 years. And that may be the case with that company, or maybe they are like, oh, it's this, but in order to do this, then we need investors, and you need the right kind of investors. Because when you're going into that world, you know, those investors are going to be making 10 odd investments. One of them is going to make it in their minds, and then they will collect. It's the thing that business people don't realize before they go in, and this is not from my own personal experience, this is what I've seen, is that then the investor will just send in the legal department and try and get as much of their investment back. Understandably. So if you're going down that route and it makes sense to do it, and you want to do it as a person, you're saying, okay, this is not a lifestyle business anymore. This is we're going to create a different machine. Accepting that you might be the person, but you might not be the person. And you have to have the lack of ego to approach that. I call it the punch bag theory. Again, these are things that have come out of my head. And maybe no idea is original. It's the same with the creative process. You have to create something, but you have to have the lack of ego to be able to allow people to beat the hell out of it, out of that idea. And then what comes out of that, if it's the same thing, if that punch bag is the same thing, great. But if it's different, you have to have the lack of ego to allow that to happen, because that's what you're doing.
Well, I mean, in mainstream business, we would call that iterative thinking, failing fast. You know, it's all of that. It's agile thinking. It's exactly. I've never heard it described as the punch bag, but it makes complete sense. And I also really like what you say about the ego, because quite often founders and chief execs find it really difficult to distance themselves from their own ideas.
I mean, I don't. I don't. And you know, I had an experience, and again, it's connected. I think it's connected with autism and ADHD, where there was a moment in time, and I know this is gonna sound crazy. I felt a being reach up the back of my neck here, my head, and rip out the ego from my body, and threw it away, and looked at me and said, "What the fuck are you gonna do about that?"
Wow. And
I think I was 20 or 21 when that happened, and I was angry. When
it was
literally, I went through that experience, and I was angry for like 6 months. I was a really confident guy. I was doing this, it was all a laugh, you know, and then that happened, and I was crushed, and I was angry, and it took 6 months for me to process and accept it, and then realize that it was a really beautiful place to come from. That actually the worst decisions in the world are made by particularly male ego. The First World War.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And to then come, and in this respect, to business, to my life, but to business, from that perspective was really useful. because now people I know people meet me and they think, oh, he's a really. Some people think that I get me completely wrong. It's really common. Get me completely wrong and think, oh, he's cocky. I get that.
Yeah.
You know, he's cocky and he's arrogant, and I'm like, yeah, no, I'm actually the complete reverse of that. But I didn't understand, because a lot of that stuff flew over my head because that happens to autists.
What happens to autists?
That their perception of other people, what you project, what I see as honesty, yeah, and talking with passion and belief, in ways, and then being interested in things like I'm a biomechanics geek. I love Pilates, so posture, for example. And I'm standing talking to I think a guy in a club once, and I'm really actually just talking to him and just aligning my spine and my posture, and he took that as me puffing my chest out at him, and kind of nearly came to blows. And and all I was doing was aligning my spine, because I'm coming from a completely different perspective. There is no ego. I don't think I'm the big man. I freely admit that I'm the lowest paid person in Metronet. Yeah, I work the most, and I'm the lowest paid. Because I choose to reinvest. And that's why the hardware manufacturer, the vendor from the Israeli company that I use for the backbone of the Metronet, sent a management team over because they wanted to meet me, and said, we met them in a pub, and they said, right, Roger, so we have 80,000 customers worldwide, and all of them have VC funding. Apart from you.
Wow.
How have you done that? And I just said, autism and Tupperware.
Why Tupperware?
Because
Spreading
I live out of Tupperware.
Oh.
I reinvest. I live frugally, and I reinvest.
Yeah.
Because nobody would give the bloke that ran the free Wi-Fi in Brighton 20 million quid. Yeah. And it's been that the same journey. The problems, we're talking about problems with the business model. Broadband is a race to the bottom. There's some great things about it, and it comes back to a previous question of yours about how to scale a business. It's about what is a business? What is a business, and what is self-employment? And this is how I look at it, and I don't want to offend anyone, because you can be great, you can be very successful being self-employed, and a celebrity would be really, really the pinnacle of that. Very successful. But for me, a business, the difference is passive income. You have to create what I call the beautiful machine, or the thing of beauty. You have to create the thing of beauty, and that thing of beauty will make you money in your sleep, because, as we've said quite a few times now, what's the problem? The problem is we've all got 24 hours in the day. We all have to sleep. We all have to eat and all that.
Absolutely.
And so the business, if you're building a business, the idea has to be based on the thing of beauty. You have to create that. Now, in other contexts, and this is probably an old term, and I'm sure there are much more, more current fashionable terms now. But back in the day, we'd call it a cash cow. So Metronet is that. We are continually growing. We are continually building. And that is continually increasing the monthly revenue of the company. Old school. This is old school stuff. You want to launch a business? Don't think about going out and getting the funding. That could be a thing. But those people will always want to see some sort of revenue. Show me something. I get it. That's an idea. It's a good idea. But how good is it? Yeah, you're wanting to give away a certain percentage of your company in shares, and it's not as much as I would want.
Yeah.
But the conversation has to be around that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So instead of going, being a business that is going for I don't know, government funding,
VC money,
or no, government funding, like a project, or VC funding, or the different types of funding streams. Yeah. Go and get a customer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was, for me, that was the thing, because I didn't know, I didn't think anyone would give me the money.
Yeah.
Yeah. And B, actually, I didn't know how.
Yeah.
I didn't have the skills. I couldn't create an EBITDA calculation for something. I didn't have the training.
So what you've done, you've bootstrapped your business. That's the term that they use now.
Okay.
You've bootstrapped it in the sense of you've refinanced the business from the profitability of the business.
Yeah.
And you've kept doing that.
Yeah.
But what that's given you, you talked about a process. It's given you a model that's been working for, how long have you been?
20 years.
20 years. Now, that's a long time for a business to be operating and running. So you've got a big track record. So from a scaling perspective, from a reliability perspective, that's a big tick. Let's try and check if we've ticked the boxes. We've talked about your history and how you came to this. You've talked about how seeing your dad achieve what he achieved impacted you and your thinking.
Yeah.
You didn't come to realize that you had this, I'm not sure, would you?
Yeah,
term it
neurodiversion. Yeah, absolutely.
And you realized that was maybe at the beginning you didn't. It was a bit of a superpower. You bumped into the Mujahideen guerrilla thinking, which you were able to pull quite a lot of aspects of that into your thinking about how to run a business.
Yeah.
And there was the mindset aspect as well, which was like resilience. We didn't talk so much about the resilience thing. Oh yeah, we did.
Yeah, I mean, it's about what I said about
keeping going when things.
I will get through this even if it kills me.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about that level. I'm keeping going even though that my body was responding in a kind of electrical ticking, really, but like an electric shock. Shocks going through my body. I was convulsing. I couldn't stop it. Yeah. But still keeping going.
Running the business.
Still doing it throughout all of that. I didn't know. You don't know. No. You don't know what kind of person you are until you're put under that kind of pressure.
Absolutely. And
the pressure was a thing. We talked about this when we first met. The pressure was the thing that I learned out of acting when I was a kid. Of
we did.
Of not just dealing with people forgetting their lines, but an occasion when the actor didn't come on stage, and there were 2,000 people in the audience, and I looked around and there were rabbits in front of headlights. That's what I saw, and I got us out of that. I tore a shred off him, as I told you. I had to, and it was fortunate. I had to take him back to a scene where that was what happened in that scene. But my God, his brain melted, absolutely melted, and it took and being trained in that kind of pressure unwittingly. And that's why I say, look, like kids that do drama, there's about empathy, and you'll get to know yourself through knowing characters, and would you respond like that or the like, and also ad lib and that kind of creativity, the confidence that can give kids. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It's really, really helpful. Because when I was in Kashmir on the LOC, I was in a chinook at 5 a.m. I got dropped off on the LOC. It was the line of control. It's the line of fire between India and Pakistan in Kashmir. And I'm being driven down the LOC at probably about 6 a.m, and an ambulance is shot up in front of me, and I found it very, very focusing, and a guy in the back seat pissed himself. And I make no judgment on him. You don't know. No. You don't know what person you are until you are put under that kind of pressure.
Yeah.
And I got it from my acting training when I was a kid. You know, I started when I was something like 10, 9 or 10. Yeah.
So would you recommend that training to?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Because it's, apart from the confidence and apart from empathy and all these other things, actually, it's about pressure. And, and then I remember making for the network in Reading, and there were something like 80 council CEOs that turned up to the launch of the network on various different things that it was. And it was nothing. It was water off a duck's back.
And you would trace that back to?
I'd trace it back to that early training.
Yeah.
And probably a good dose of autism that I never knew I had, that I could separate things off really easily. Yeah. That I could deal with that level of pressure, or at least thinking that I could. That then I came to a point in time when the business was trying to be taken from me, and I thought I could go through it, and then I'm shaking uncontrollably and violently, physically, but my mind is still, I am gonna get through this, and I did. But there is collateral. There is collateral damage. I'm not with my wife and my kids anymore, and I do not. I mean, it's sad. Yeah. It's not. I'm not putting myself out there as, hey guys, you want to get into business, then you need to sacrifice everything. Yeah. That I'm not advocating that. There are lots of people who balance their lives in this kind of way. What am I saying about that? I guess I'm saying sorry. Yeah. I guess I'm saying sorry to my wife, my children. Yeah. Nobody knew at the start of that, of growing, getting married, growing a family, that I was an autist with ADHD hyperfocus, and that was it. Yeah. And they're amazing. My kids are amazing. And it's just sad it didn't work out that way, that I won't have the same experiences that lots of fathers have, that I would love to have, but it ain't happening. It's not going to happen.
There's no way of recovering that.
It's not that it's lost. It's just the circumstance of it. They're now in a different town. They're in Hastings, not Brighton, with lots of circumstantial stuff around it. Yeah. But nobody knew. And for me, I had to get through this. I had to get through that aggressive takeover attempt of the business. Yeah. And through that, I eventually learnt who I was. Right. And I'm good at a lot of things, and I'm not at others.
So what would be your message to people watching this then, who, let's say, people who are autists, and they're, whether they're high functioning or not? But what you've just said there just now makes me think, would you suggest that people go and get diagnosed if they suspect they are, because once they're diagnosed, that's a help? Would you say?
I would say get diagnosed if it's a problem. Right. Right. If it's not a problem, then live your life.
What's the point in being labelled?
What's the point? What's the point in being labelled?
Okay.
For me, it was really helpful for me, it allowed me to understand who I was, where I'd come from, the journey between the boy back in, in his 20s, or even earlier in school, where I stood up against bullies bullying other kids because it wasn't right, it wasn't okay, and then got bullied.
Right. Oh,
Of course I did.
Yeah.
There was this is a sort of an answer to the same question, but it was a conversation that I had recently, randomly, in a pub at a friend's birthday, and it was a chap who works as a human rights lawyer,
Right.
and working rights, and he's the last 2 years he has been working on a case around a whistleblower. In fact, that's what he does. He generally picks up the cases that are whistleblowers. And I was talking to him about autism because I'm very free. Well, obviously, I'm very free. I'm talking on a podcast about it. Crikey, how more free can you be? And he said, the thing is, there needs to be more of you. Every single one of the whistleblowers that I've had, that my cases are clearly autistic, because they know what's right, what's wrong.
Wow.
Yeah? And that's important.
Yeah.
He said, what do you want to be? How do you want to be accounted for at the end of your life? Are you going to be the person that stood up or not? Because a classic neurotypical reaction is just get by here.
Yeah.
And he's working on this job, and it's the kid's first job.
Wow.
It was his first ever job, and he saw that it wasn't right.
Yeah.
And so he pushed the button, and they ended up putting a camera on this kid, 17, and he went into pretty serious situations, because this was not okay, and he was absolutely right. And this lawyer he said, and from that's been the last 2 years of my life working, building the case on that kid's evidence. And it brings up another thing. So, if you are an autist, if you've been diagnosed with autism and ADHD, and this is another reason for whether you should get a diagnosis or not. If you're diagnosed and it's on your medical records, and you want to go to, say, Australia, and apply for a working visa, you will be rejected by the Australian government.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there's discrimination against autists.
Autism and ADHD. The Australian government will not give you a working permit. Fact.
Wow.
And I look at that and I go, wow, you idiots. You idiots. Because, hey, look, does that mean you're not going to give Elon Musk a working visa?
Don't think so.
I mean, it's just nuts.
Yeah.
It's those people
Yeah.
who are going to come out
Yeah.
with the new ideas, the lateral thinking.
Yeah. And he'll stick at things.
They'll go obsessively
Yeah.
at those things.
Yeah.
And your perception, of course, ADHD is grossly misnamed. Yeah. It's really badly named. That it might often not have anything to do with attention deficit or even hyperactivity. Yeah. that it involves people who can hyper-focus on an idea, a thing. And I wouldn't want, in imparting that information about whistleblowers and autism, for then companies to go, okay, I don't want, and that, whether they take that the wrong way or not, I have to leave to them. But there is a balance to it. That yes, those people know what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah.
But the same people
Yeah.
are, this is going to sound cheesy, are needed to save the world.
Yeah. I completely
And
agree.
I mean that.
Yeah.
I mean that specifically from, we're in a race. Humankind is in the race. It's a race on 3 axes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Time, population growth, and the amount of natural resources, and climate change. Yeah? Is that right? There's technology in there as well. There's several axes.
Yeah.
Yeah? We need to get through, we needed to have gotten through the fossil fuels to get to the knowledge of technology where we don't need them. Yeah? And that we can use technology to reverse the damage that's been done.
Yeah.
Yeah? There is the population growth, which I can't do anything about. It's going to be what it's going to be. Yeah, there's time, and really that's climate change. But it's, population numbers, time, the amount of damage that we do versus and technology. And the key thing in there is power. And the person that's going to solve that it's not a neurotypical job. Yeah? There needs to be a new Bletchley Park. Yeah? There needs to be a new Archimedes.
Yeah.
There needs to be a new Alan Turing.
Yeah.
Because what we need to solve now is not as easy as the Enigma code. It's much harder, and it's much more fundamental.
Yeah.
And it's, I'm thinking cold water fusion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is the holy grail of physics. And it's added by, it's either going to be cold water fusion or an energy that harnesses the Earth's magnetism. And and the cold water fusion is aided by, there's actually an extra proton in seawater that has been discovered. Actually, there's so much of it that it's right literally underneath our noses. It's in seawater.
So what you're saying is that if we can use the brains of our brightest people, but I would actually add to that we also need to harness the brains of our maybe not as bright people, and work in tandem much better.
No, I think that's no. I hope I haven't got you wrong. It is, what I'm saying is that job is not a neurotypical job in the same way as the Victorians, Brunel, Stevenson, some chap who wanted to get a cylinder into another cylinder with a tenth of a millimeter difference so that you could capture steam. Autist. Yeah? Bloody autist.
Yes.
Hyper-focused autist. I mean, Christ, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah? It's It's the fact that there is an environment where a government is discriminating against spectrum, people on the spectrum, yeah? And everything about me tells me that in order to get out of this problem that we are in the middle of, and we will see in our lifetimes. We used to think it was going to be our grandchildren. They're going to have to pick up this one. It's not. Yeah. It's going to be in our lifetimes. We're seeing it at the moment. Yeah, you've seen the storms go up the, American East Coast. Yeah, you've seen the devastation. It's happening everywhere. You've seen the fires in Australia. You've seen the floods. Yeah, it's that. It's solving those problems that is going to require the people that Australia are blocking at the moment. Right. Yeah. And if I was at school at the moment and I was autistic, or thought that I was autistic, or I might be, or ADHD, I would be going into physics, into renewable power. I mean, I'm a nuclear fan. Right. Yeah. Absolutely. That was the technology. Yeah. And amazingly, Germany canned it in the middle of a clear war where they're taking Russian gas. And if anything hadn't been shown to them so starkly, but they then still followed through. It was Angela Merkel's fault, And so I appreciate that not everyone's going to agree with me on that. I get it. And I'm also a fan of. Oh, this is going to sound awful. I'm also a fan of Bill Gates in terms of the work that he's done in nuclear, of redefining the architecture of a nuclear power station so it automatically shuts down if it's failing. Oh. Yeah, massive.
I didn't know he was doing that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And was about to roll it out in China before Donald Trump last time round created a trade war between him and China. He was like, we'd thought that we did an analysis of government interference, but we didn't think it was going to come from our own government. I mean, brilliant. But that, whether it's nuclear, I think that's part of it. Whether it's cold water fusion, whether it's the Earth's magnetism, those are the main sources of energy, as well as the sun and solar and all of that kind of stuff. I get it, yeah. But that requires an autist.
So that's almost your opportunity call to people like you out there.
We need a new Archimedes. That's the call.
But that was also interesting what you said there about the whistleblowing, because I think that is another problem in society right now, that we're doing things that are often wrong, and we need people who actually say, no, there is right and there's wrong. Let's call it out.
Yeah. And it's got me in loads of trouble.
Yeah.
Loads of trouble.
I can imagine.
Loads of trouble in the past. Do I regret it? No.
So
because who are you? Yeah? Who are you? Yeah, what's inside Phil's head? What's inside Phil's identity? What makes Phil? Yeah? And it's opinion. Yeah? It's thought. If you don't act on that thought, because I have lots of theories, I call it the passive pulp.
Yeah.
That's all you are.
Yeah.
You're a passive pulp.
100%.
You get this is mush.
Yeah.
This gets beaten into mush.
Yeah.
And you end up just churning up to a job day after day, not knowing what the hell you're going to do with your life because you have become a passive pulp. Yeah. It can happen. It happens all the time. Yeah. But who are you and what does it mean? What's the point? Yeah? And the point is about acting on your opinions. And your opinion is essentially what is right, what is wrong in a very binary way.
And what you're interested in.
Yeah. But you can have opinions and things that you're not interested in, and you can still whistleblow on that and things like that.
Yeah,
What you're interested in becomes a hyper focus.
Yeah.
Becomes a hyper focus for the stuff that you're not interested in. Well, that's the classic ADHD looking out the window scenario.
Yeah,
Daydream scenario.
Yeah.
But then you put Rog, the 9-year-old, and give him a play and give him a part in a play, and then one person believed in me. This wonderful acting teacher called Kay Jackman, who I dearly loved, and I turned up at her funeral a few years back, and I explained to her grandchildren that the person with dementia that they saw was not Kay. Yeah. And she was the one. She believed in me. I think she was. Yeah, there was. I think my education. There was 2 people. One was Kay, and then there was a. What was his name? There was a history teacher, and I got put forward for Oxbridge as the wild card. It was called the wild card. There were lots of people who were clever, and they were put up in it. But I was put up as the, maybe you could smash it, maybe you'll bomb, but let's do it. Wow. And they called me the wild card, and I went into that Oxbridge exam. Do you want to hear this story?
Yeah.
I went into that Oxbridge exam. And I had to answer 3 essays. And there were 5 essays in 3 topics, and I had to answer an essay from each topic. Yeah? Mm-hmm. And in the first topic, and in one of the sections, there was an essay about Disraeli. And in the second section, there was another question about Disraeli, and then there was the third topic. And I thought, I know, I'm the wild card. I'm going to write a massive essay about Disraeli. And then in the next section, topic, 1, 2, 3 topics, yeah. And in that section, I can choose I wrote another essay about Disraeli, contradicting everything that I said about Disraeli in the first essay. And then in the third one, partly because I ran out of time, I just wrote number 3, ? And I got an interview. Wow. I think I was one of 2 people out of 10 who taken that exam who got an interview. And I turned up, and being an idiot, apart from getting really stoned the night before in Christchurch College quad, I was the wild card. I then went for the interview, and there was this old fuddy-duddy professor, bald, hair around the sides, books on his desk, library around him. And he said, "So, Mr. Horlock, why did you write about Disraeli, and then contradict yourself on wrote this about Disraeli?" And I, like an idiot, I said, "Well, I just wanted to be sure of the first question that you'd asked me in this interview."
Say that again. You wanted to be sure of the
first question that he'd asked me in this interview. Which got his back up. Now, I could have had a really interesting conversation about historiography, which nobody else would have had. Yeah? And failing on that front was failing about an autist not reading a room and probably being hungover from dope the night before. Yeah? Because smoking dope just makes you stupid.
It doesn't help.
Yeah, it doesn't help.
No.
Yeah? That's another thing I'd say to everyone, kids.
Yeah, still.
Yeah? Honestly, it's just a waste of time. I lost a load of my life in doing that. I didn't fulfill my potential for a long period of time because of that. Like, of course, you don't realise you're a kid. Yeah? But the autistic side of it was not being able to read it, to not knowing that was completely unfiltered. Yeah. So I guess there's a lesson. I mean, there's an obvious lesson in there of doing your work, making sure you know what you're gonna say beforehand, making sure that you because you've got the intelligence to lead it in a way. If I'd known, if I knew, as I knew, he was going to ask me that question, well, then that, as the candidate, gives you the employee, gives you as a candidate the chance to own the interview.
Yeah, completely.
And instead of having a conversation, as I say, about historiography, I cracked a joke and it fell badly and I didn't get into Oxford.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what in summing up then, I think we have covered quite a bit of stuff with, we've covered a lot. In summing up, what would be your message out to autists and maybe entrepreneurs or potential entrepreneurs who are questioning, should I pursue this and do my own thing, or should I just go and get a job?
You are not alone would be my message
To the autists.
to the autists. You have to remember that a lot of them won't know they're autistic. I mean, I was only diagnosed at 45.
Wow.
Yeah, I went through the whole of that system, and I read my school reports recently when my dad died and we were clearing out the house, and I found my school reports, and for the first time I could map them one to the other to the other to the other, and I'm looking at this, and I'm like,
that's why.
Nobody had my back. Nobody had my back. How blatantly obvious this is. Year on year. And them going, oh, we didn't think he was going to pull off this part. I ended up being the main part in the
Like
school. Well, that was at primary school, and then secondary school I was the main part in the last bit in the play of that. And they didn't think that I could pull it off, but he did. And it's interesting what happens when he's he can actually focus on something that he's interested in. All of those comments.
Yeah.
Going back, there was this opportunity to read them, which I did, and the feeling of nobody having my back, and only now understanding that the education system isn't geared up for many. This is not a rare thing, autism and ADHD, and it's not a new thing. No. It's first documented in the 1700s.
Wow.
Yeah, this is not a new thing that's come around from, I don't know, processed foods or microwaves or mobile phones to our ears that are changing our brains. It's not. We've always had this. There's some evidence that it actually goes back to Neanderthals. And the Neanderthal brain.
And yet we haven't done anything about it in education.
We haven't done education, the scope and the practice and the testing of education is made for a certain type of individual. I guess they had to come out with something. Yeah. And is the government going to be able to change this, to understand enough that I can't see that happening. So therefore, you asked me about a message to those people. You're not stupid. You're not stupid. Your brain may be architected in a different way. Mine is. And that allows you to look at things in a different way. You might not have a conventional life. You might try to squeeze in to a conventional life. Maybe you're successful in that. I doubt you'll be happy because you'll be masking the whole time. This would be coming back to the camouflage thing that you're talking about, that I call congruence. The desire to be congruent with your environment. Well, that's quite a natural thing. But I think A, you won't be happy. B, you won't fulfill your full potential. And there are groups out there. There's an ADHD self-funded group in Brighton, or autist group in Brighton. And there'll be in other towns and cities, to explore, to investigate, to see if that is you, to understand. And look, not everyone has a superpower. Haven't met those people, but apparently we shouldn't talk about superpowers. I have been told that as well. But there is a high likelihood that if you find your thing, find the thing that you're interested in, focus on that, focus on doing good, and build your confidence, relax into the person that you are. And business is, Metronet, we could be dead. No one could be dead tomorrow. I mean, I always joke about, like, we should be dead already. There's lots of other competitors who are coming into the city. And yet we're more busy than we've ever been. I can't get to opportunities and I'm too busy to then recruit the other stuff, Scaling.
Yeah.
So I guess have faith in yourself, have faith in your own ability. Do remember the world owes you nothing. And that you have to go out and grab it and make it happen. Because you could be lucky, but most of you won't. That it's not going to land on your plate. You're going to have to make it happen, and to make it happen, you have to step out. That requires confidence, but you don't know what you don't know. It's okay. That's okay. That's the starting point of anything. Accept that. And then find out, and do that through finding like-minded people, finding those networks. I have a mantra, which is look after the people that look after you. I had an old chap in my family who told me that, and I was about 23 at the time. And that was the other thing. My dad told me that, and it was his cousin that told me that line. And that probably was the most powerful thing that somebody had ever said to me. And that is how I run my business. Most people think that businesses are run by people who are using them, sociopaths, psychopaths. Yeah, that does happen. Yeah. Where they are not looking after those people, they're using those people. And the mantra that I've found and that has worked well for me in the main is the complete opposite. Yeah. Look after the people that look after you.
Yeah.
And I guess that's a cultural thing that can be adopted into a business. And I do things like I hire out a gym once a week with a physio, and we all do powerlifting in there, rather than some sort of cheesy bonding, build a raft and cross a river type thing. Yeah, we just go into the gym and fix, because of my biomechanics, autist geek stuff. I can see pain in people, and I know how to change that, and that allows me to connect to employees in a very personal way. It's actually a meaningful way. Yeah, I had an engineer who had an issue with his knee. He was being given some really powerful anti-inflammatories that are also antipsychotic, tramadol type medication. Antipsychotics have an added benefit of being anti-inflammatory. It's a thing. It was spinning him out. He was off work, and I looked at it, and I came in and I brought another one of my Pilates contacts, personal trainers, and the like, and we looked at his knee and did some tests, and then realised that he had a Hoffus pad injury. It's a gelatinous pad behind the kneecap, behind the patella. Yeah, and because he was slightly overweight, his pelvis tilted. The next thing that happens in the kinetic chain is he was hyperextending his knee. That sucked his Hoffus pad into his knee joint and inflamed it. We put some TENS machine on it. We deflamed it. We lifted his patella out with some taping, and we brought him out of pain for the first time in over a decade.
Wow.
And so that's what I mean by look after the people that look after you. Yeah. By connecting with them as only an autist can. Because I can't go, oh yeah, hi, should we have a pint? But I can do something that has meaning.
Well, funnily enough, I think that message, clearly you're communicating that and talking to the people who, when we first started, you wanted to get that message to. But to be honest, I think that message is relevant to every business owner, because I think that everything you've said there, if you apply that to business, you'll have a better, happier, more successful, and probably faster growing business if you apply those things that you've just said. So I think that's fantastic. I think this has been an amazing conversation.
Really fun.
It could have gone anywhere, and I think it has gone in lots of different areas. It covers
absolutely the things that I wanted to cover this evening.
So thank you so much, Roger. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
It's great.
Thank you. Brilliant.
It's great.